If you're at the point where you almost don't even bother bringing up to your partner when they've done something that upset you, because you already know they'll either get defensive or flip it back on you, and somehow you end up being the one who always has to apologize, I feel you. It's exhausting. I want to talk to you about a small shift that I call your 2% that helps address that. I'm Jennell Elias. I help high-performing couples or couples with high-demand lives avoid feeling like distant roommates, restore intimacy, and build growth that actually lasts. The unspoken dynamic in any relationship is that you have two flawed, imperfect people with their own past life experiences, traumas, baggage, and learned ways of reacting to stress suddenly joining pretty much every aspect of their lives. From handling bills and financial goals, to running a household, growing in our careers, to even how we spend our downtime. We're not doing any of it just us on our own anymore. What tends to happen, without even trying, is that our relationship becomes a sort of magnified mirror of ourselves. If there's an insecurity that we have deep down that maybe we might not even be aware of, or we don't usually stop to think about on a day-to-day basis, suddenly being in a relationship brings that insecurity to light, perhaps purely by accident, maybe triggered by a passing comment or a casual action that they didn't really think about in the moment, but now we're feeling a certain kind of way about it, and it's a whole argument. If there is a personality flaw about us, like, for example, maybe our sense of humor needs some work, because sometimes we might make certain jokes that are a little too heavy and rub people the wrong way. Or maybe we're really territorial about our living space and we don't like people touching our stuff. Whatever it is, because none of us are perfect and we all have some kind of flaws, it probably wasn't too big of a deal while single, when we don't have to answer to anyone, and if others had a problem with our flaws, they could either keep it to themselves or we could brush it off easily because who cares what they think. But sharing a life with someone automatically means there is a whole other human being witnessing everything about us all of the time. So it's built in that they're going to notice and be more affected by those traits. They might even say something about it. It might even hurt our feelings that they called it out. Maybe they didn't say it in a very tactful way, and it made hearing the feedback even worse. I'll take it a step further and say, if there are any particularly toxic traits about us, being in a relationship usually means those traits end up getting triggered at various times. And now we have to deal with, one, maybe the realization that we even have some of those toxic traits to begin with, and two, what we'll actually do about those traits now that we know. Here's a basic human principle. We as people tend to have at least some amount of desire for self-preservation that encourages us to run away from anything that might be dangerous or scary or do us harm. It's true for the fight or flight survival situations, but it's also true on an emotional level. We don't like feeling bad about ourselves. Who would? So typically, if our psyche deep down had a choice between blissful ignorance that there is anything negative about us at all, or that we might have hurt someone else through something that we said or did, even accidentally, our self-protective defense mechanism would much rather cover our metaphorical ears and bury our heads in the sand, avoiding that uncomfortable reality. This is why, for many people, when confronted with an ugly truth about us that goes against the image we've created about ourselves in our own minds, like the core belief that deep down we are good people and we try to do good things, we'll often react in defensive ways, like denying it or getting angry or rationalizing that it was an accident or that we didn't mean to do it. Self-protective defense measures like that are natural and part of our brain's way of keeping us safe from perceived threats. The problem is that we as rational, thinking, evolved humans know that we can't always do what our brains are urging us to do. Our brains light up when we feed our bodies sugar and carbs, but if we always do that, we can end up very unhealthy. It might tell us that we want something shiny, that we see in a store or something, but we can't always just grab whatever we like because we know it goes against our society's rules and laws. We might feel the self-defensive urge to run away during a scary presentation or punch someone if they're making us angry, but giving into those urges would only cause trouble and be more harmful than helpful. This applies to our relationships too. When we make a mistake or do or say something that hurts our significant other, and they let us know that we have hurt them, even if unintentionally, we have a choice to step into our self-defense mode and protect our own feelings by doing things like denying that it was that bad, or explaining away the excuses, or even shifting the blame to them by highlighting what they did wrong in the situation to take the heat off ourselves, or we can take responsibility for our part in the situation. The problem with taking the route of defending ourselves rather than owning the role we played in the problem is that over time it trains our significant others that they shouldn't bother coming to us with their hurts or their concerns. We're not going to listen anyway, at least that's how they feel, and somehow it always ends up being their fault either way. So they learn that they're better off swallowing the frustration, which only ends up in them blowing up later, letting it show through passive-aggressive tactics or nagging, or just pulling away from us altogether. It's a deep root to a lot of repeated patterns among couples. When working with couples or even speaking with my husband, I have a phrase called my 2%, which I use to describe that portion of the issue that is my fault, however big or small it might be. If, as the phrase says, it takes two to tango, then the point could be made that whatever argument we are having, both of us have some amount of fault in the situation. Maybe my husband really messed up and he hurt my feelings, and this is entirely on him. But even then, was there anything about the situation that I could have done better? That's my 2%. If he really messed up, and this is 98% on him, did I maybe give unclear instructions or communication at the beginning to make sure he knew what he needed to do or what my expectations were? Did I maybe react in a way that could have escalated the situation or made things worse? Maybe made an assumption, thinking that we were on the same page, leading to this opportunity for a misunderstanding. Without letting him off the hook, what is my 2% responsibility in this that I could have done better or avoided, that I can learn from for the next time? Usually our arguments and relationship troubles have fault on both sides that are closer to 50-50 or maybe even 60-40, but I call it the 2% rule because even in the case where the other person is almost entirely at fault and we are seemingly innocent in the matter, there's always at least one tiny thing we can own up to on our end. So why is this important? Because when we are both keeping an eye out for the things that we messed up in or need to take responsibility for, then we take away a lot of the shame that is often tacked onto couples' arguments. Focusing on my percent of the problems means we're both coming to the conversation humble and ready to work through this problem. It's not me versus them and who will end up the loser of the argument. It's, hey, we're both flawed here. You hurt me for sure, and we need to address that. But I acknowledge that I also made some choices that caused you to hurt too. It's also important because it moves us to a place where we build trust and emotional safety in the relationship. Trust that when things go wrong, we can figure it out together. We'll take what they're telling us seriously, and that we aren't just going to play the blame game or use other tactics to avoid feeling guilty. Even if it is uncomfortable and we don't like to feel like we did anything wrong or hurt the people we care about, we are going to push aside that self-defensive urge and step up for our partners by owning our faults. It does require a bit of removing our egos from the situation, but that's a personal growth thing that we can all benefit from anyway. Don't get me wrong. Taking responsibility for our part of the problem does not mean we are letting our partners off the hook. They still did their percent of this problem, and they also need to take responsibility for it. they still need to apologize, do the repair work, do their part of things, but so do we. One doesn't negate the other. And yes, we can both be hurt by the situation from our own respective reasons that we should probably talk about. That said, if we find ourselves constantly being the one apologizing or arguing with someone that usually ends up turning things around on us, then it might be time to show them this video and call them out on the fact that they too need to practice owning their 2% of the problem, or whatever percentage it might be in that situation. I want to encourage both of you to practice finding the moments where you can acknowledge your part in the issue that came up and watch how the dynamic begins to transform between you two. Subscribe if you haven't yet so you can catch my live Q&A sessions, and I'll talk to you again soon.